I'm Sara Chen.
And I'm Bart Smith.
And this is Behind the Yellow Tape, where we investigate the cases that keep detectives up at night.
Okay, so this deep dive, it's a tough one. We're going down a dark road even for us. We're looking into the Colleen Stan case.
Colleen Stan, yeah.
The woman held captive for over 7 years.
Right.
The girl in the box case,
Yeah.
You've probably heard it called that. But even if you think you know this story, and maybe you do, maybe you've read up on it, there are layers to this that we're going to unpack.
Absolutely. Cases like this, they really expose the depths of human cruelty, but also, on the flip side of that, they really highlight the incredible resilience of the human spirit. And, my background's in profiling, and so understanding the kind of mind that could conceive of this type of crime is, well, it's part of what drew me to this field.
Yeah, I can imagine. And we're not just looking at the who of the captors in this deep dive, right? We're also looking at the how of Colleen's survival. How did she make it through this? We've got court documents, we've got psychological evaluations, we even have firsthand accounts. It's a lot to process.
It is.
So we're back in 1977. Colleen's a young woman. She's hitchhiking to a friend's party.
Right.
And today that sounds so risky, but back then.
Yeah, it was commonplace. It's almost tragically ironic how, what was once considered a normal act, now sends shivers down our spines because of cases like this.
Right. It was a different time. And that's what makes the hookers' plan even more disturbing. They use their baby as a prop.
Right.
Driving a van that looked like any other family vehicle. There's this detail, and it always gets me. Colleen almost got into another car. Can you imagine? Like a sliding doors moment.
It's chilling. And it makes you think about the psychology of predators. They often exploit the very normalcy that you're talking about. It's not about, sticking out. It's about blending in, appearing non-threatening. They're looking for someone who seems vulnerable, who seems trusting, someone who fits their idea of an easy target.
And Colleen, unfortunately, got into their van, and that's when everything changed. They drove her to a secluded spot, and Cameron Hooker, armed with a knife, he forces this homemade box onto her head. It's almost impossible to fathom the terror she must have felt in that moment.
Absolutely. But beyond the immediate terror of that moment, let's talk about the box itself. This wasn't some, makeshift container. This was meticulously built. It was about 9 inches cubed, heavy, with very limited air holes. This speaks to a level of premeditation, of intending not just abduction, but prolonged, calculated suffering.
The details are really hard to hear. Sensory deprivation alone can push someone to the edge, but the weight, the darkness, to be trapped like that for hours at a time, sometimes almost an entire day.
That's the insidiousness of it. This wasn't just about physical confinement. It was about breaking down our sense of self. Sensory deprivation, isolation. Those are techniques used in torture for a reason. They warp your perception. They make you doubt your own mind.
It really is hard to even imagine what goes through someone's mind during something like that. You're physically trapped, but then to have this mental manipulation happening at the same time.
And that's exactly what Cameron Hooker was doing. It's not like Colleen was just kept in this box somewhere. She was kept under his bed.
Like an object, not even a person.
Precisely. And they actually had a slightly larger box that they built for under the bed, but still, to be subjected to that kind of degradation in darkness and the heat, we're talking extreme heat sometimes, over 100 degrees. It's almost beyond comprehension.
And what's so disturbing is that juxtaposition, right? You have this horrific abuse going on, but the hookers are going about their lives. They had children, they interacted with their community.
Right.
All while Colleen was imprisoned just feet away.
It speaks to the duality of these individuals. The ability to compartmentalize, to maintain this facade of normalcy while perpetrating such cruelty. It's a chilling reminder that evil often wears a very ordinary mask.
It's terrifying. And then there's the company, this shadowy organization they invent, telling Colleen that they'll hurt her family if she tries to escape.
Right, the company. And of course, the company wasn't real. This was a fabrication, a tool of manipulation. But for Colleen, isolated and traumatized as she was, it became her reality. And this is a tactic that we see often in cults, in abusive relationships, the creation of this external threat that forces obedience through fear.
So it's a way of controlling someone without having to be physically present all the time. The fear itself becomes the jailer.
Exactly. And it's incredibly effective. But Cameron Hooker, he took this manipulation even further. He forced Colleen to sign what he called a slave contract, gave her a new name, K, and systematically cut off contact with her family. He even convinced her that they had stopped looking for her. So it was a very calculated effort to erase her identity, her sense of self, and replace it with one of his own making.
It's just heartbreaking to strip someone of their name, their history, their connections to their loved ones.
And to replace those connections with this terrifying lie. And remember, this wasn't just a brief period. I mean, Colleen endured this for years. Years. The psychological impact of that kind of prolonged systematic abuse is profound. It can literally rewire the brain, impacting a person's thoughts, emotions, their behaviors, long after the physical confinement ends.
It's almost unfathomable that someone could withstand that level of psychological manipulation for so long. But then things took an even more unexpected turn.
Yeah, and after years of this horrific ordeal, we start to see, I don't know, like a glimmer of light.
Okay.
Colleen's allowed out of the box more. She's even allowed to visit her family.
Right.
It feels like maybe, just maybe, there's hope.
It's a deceptively complex turn of events. You know, on the surface, yes, you see these glimmers of freedom, but the psychological reality is far more nuanced. During this time, Colleen is sending letters home, but not the letters you might expect.
She doesn't ask for help.
No. Instead, she perpetuates the lie of the company. She tells her family she's chosen to join this group, reinforcing Cameron Hooker's fabricated reality.
So even with a chance to reach out, to break free, she clings to this story. This is where we see the potential manifestation of Stockholm Syndrome, that complex psychological response to captivity. And it's important to understand it's not about agreeing with the captor, it's about survival. It's about creating a sense of safety in an inherently unsafe situation.
So by aligning herself with Cameron and the company, Colleen is trying to, I don't know, psychologically survive an impossible situation.
Exactly. It's a testament to the human psyche's ability to adapt, even in the most horrific circumstances. But, and this is crucial, Stockholm Syndrome doesn't excuse the abuser or minimize the trauma inflicted. It's a coping mechanism, not a choice.
That makes a lot of sense. But it still begs the question, if Colleen's clinging to this fabricated reality, how does she ultimately break free?
Well, this is where the story takes another unexpected turn. It wasn't Colleen who initiated the escape. It was Janice, Cameron Hooker's wife.
Wow, that's incredible. She was in on it the whole time, wasn't she?
Well, it's not that simple. It seems Janice was also a victim of Cameron's manipulation, living under his control, enduring abuse herself.
Wow.
She eventually saw the danger her daughters were in and found the strength to act.
So Janice takes Colleen to see her family, reveals the truth about the company, and helps her escape.
In a sense, yes, but it wasn't immediate. Colleen didn't run straight to the police. She was still processing the weight of 7 years of manipulation. It took time for her to fully grasp the reality of what she endured.
That's understandable. It's not as simple as walking away, even if you're physically free. But eventually, justice was served.
Yes. Janice's testimony was crucial, as was the physical evidence, the box, the slave contract, even Cameron's diaries detailing his abuse. He was sentenced to over 100 years, ensuring he'd never harm another soul.
Wow. While nothing can erase those 7 years, at least there's a sense of justice in his conviction. But what about Colleen? How do you even begin to heal from that kind of trauma?
That's the long road, isn't it? And Colleen has shown incredible strength. She changed her name, rebuilt her life, earned a degree, and became an advocate for other survivors. She even bravely shared her story in a book.
It speaks to the incredible resilience of the human spirit, to endure such darkness and emerge as this, beacon of hope for others.
It's a testament to the power of hope, even in the face of unimaginable cruelty. Her story, while so difficult to hear, reminds us that healing is possible, and the human spirit can triumph, even over the darkest of experiences.
Yeah. This deep dive has been incredibly heavy, but also profoundly moving. If there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from this, it's that you never truly know the battles someone might be facing behind their own eyes. Colleen's story is a stark reminder to approach each other with empathy and understanding, and to never lose hope in the power of the human spirit to overcome even the most harrowing experiences.